Comrades and friends, welcome to the program Global Weekly News, serial number 146. First item, US-China trade war. On 7th April, Donald Trump imposed 104% tariffs on Chinese imports. China, in retaliation to this, imposed 84% tariffs on US imports. This will come into effect from 8th April, China said. Trump increased tariffs on Chinese imports to 125%. This trade war continues with both parties reciprocally increasing tariffs on each other. China also issued a white paper on 9th April about its trade relations with the US. The white paper refutes the claims of a massive trade deficit with China. It claims the trade between both countries is rather practically balanced. The so-called reciprocal tariffs announced by Trump last week targeted imports from over 50 countries. However, most of these tariffs have now been passed, temporarily suspended for 90 days. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson said that his country will not give in to economic blackmail, which is in complete violation of all the established international norms. He said in a press conference, "We will not let anyone take away the Chinese people's legitimate right to development. We will not tolerate any attempt to harm China's sovereignty, security and development interests." China-US mutual trade stood at over $68,800 crore in 2024. China is the US third largest trade partner after Canada and Mexico, with the exports to China amounting to 7% of all US exports in 2024. US exports to China mostly consist of agricultural products, energy and automobiles. Since China believes that trade and tariff wars have no winners, it has simultaneously made efforts to resolve all disputes through dialogue and consultation, engaging with the US at multiple rounds and signing the US-China Phase 1 trade agreement during Trump's first term in 2020. The white paper points out that in complete violation of its obligations under this agreement, the US side has continuously tightened export control and escalated sanctions against the Chinese enterprises. Trump's policies are in conflict with the principles of the market economy, run counter to multilateralism, and will have serious repercussions for China-US economic and trade relations. These policies will have the worst effects on the US economy itself, the Chinese white paper warns. Second item, comrades, we go to Lesotho, a very small country in Africa. Lesotho gears up to face highest US tariff rate. Lesotho is one of the smallest and poorest sub-Saharan African countries. Its population is just 23 lakhs. Fears around the 50% tariff imposed on this poor country may sound the death knell of its largest private sector employer, the textile industry, which exports 75% of its output to the United States. 35,000 workers, predominantly women, are employed in this sector, which yields about 20% of Lesotho's gross domestic product. About 12,000 of them working in large factories producing denim. Denim means a crude cotton used for jeans pant. Producing denim for the jeans labeled by American brands like Levi's and Wrangler are at immediate risk of losing their jobs. 12,000 workers are immediate risk of losing their jobs. Lesotho's unemployment rate is as high as 25%. The unemployed will have to join the large number of people migrating from Lesotho to South Africa to eke out a living as sex slaves, domestic workers and illegal miners. The World Bank estimates that 36% of its population, that is 23 lakhs population, earn less than $2.15 a day. In rupee terms, rupees 185 per day. A full 67% of Lesotho's population is considered poor. However, the workers manufacturing the US-destined jeans in Lesotho's factories cannot afford to buy a single pair of jeans, earning only $150 a month. Lesotho, like many other countries of the global south, reeling under the impact of US tariffs, illustrates the perils, the dangers of an industrial policy dependent on foreign markets without prioritizing the development of the domestic market. Third item, comrades, Trump's tariffs could intensify Sri Lanka's debt crisis. The US market accounts for 23% of Sri Lanka's exports and 38% of its main export item, apparel and textiles. This industry directly employs 350,000 workers, was premised on access to the US and European markets. This was facilitated through quotas assigned by the multi-fiber agreement between 1974 and 1994. 74 to 94. Sri Lanka is continuing to struggle to recover from its worst economic crisis since independence. On 3rd April, Sri Lankans woke up to the alarming news that the US would be applying 44% tariffs on Sri Lankans' imports. These tariffs will hit Sri Lanka just months after it officially exited sovereign default status in December 2024. In 2023, Sri Lanka's external debt stood at $5,500 crore or 65% of its GDP. In 2022, Sri Lanka's tourism and remittance-dependent economy lost hundreds of crores of dollars in foreign currency due to the impact of the COVID-19. Commodity prices increased due to supply chain bottlenecks, and the Ukraine-Russia conflict placed a further burden on foreign currency reserves. The situation led to extreme shortages of essentials, rolling blackouts, and long queues for fuel and cooking gas. In April 2022, Sri Lanka became the first country in the Asia Pacific to default on external debt since 1999. In the 2 years since, the country has undergone a painful process of austerity under the 17th IMF program. Insufficient attention is paid to the country's ability to generate foreign currency. The IMF's treatment of countries like Sri Lanka is in stark contrast to how the US treated its allies like West Germany in the early years of the Cold War, that is immediately after the Second World War. The broad goal of protectionism by the US is to maintain the international division of labor by preventing the development of productive forces in the global south. Comrades, we go to South America now. CELAC summit in Honduras. What is CELAC? Honduras expects to receive 33 representatives at the upcoming annual meeting of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, that is CELAC, a regional organization founded on 3rd December 2011 in Caracas of Venezuela. Since 2013, member countries have held annual summits in various locations except for 2022. According to the President of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, the meeting is to be held on 9th April, signifies a step towards the unity of Latin America and the Caribbean, facing global challenges such as climate change, drug trafficking and migration. CELAC was created to foster regional unity in the face of the most pressing geopolitical challenges, as well as create an alternative to the US-dominated Organization of American States. The presidents of the following countries will attend the CELAC summit: Brazil, Bolivia, Haiti, Mexico, Colombia, Guatemala, Uruguay, Cuba and Honduras. The remaining countries will send foreign ministers, prime ministers or high-level representatives. The discussions in the summit will deal with Trump's immigration policy and the recent tariff measures that Washington has imposed. Fifth item, comrades, setback to Kenyan-led mission in Haiti. The UN-backed Kenyan-led mission faces significant challenges as armed gangs. The UN-backed Kenyan-led mission faces significant challenges as armed gangs escalate violence across Haiti. The security situation has deteriorated sharply in recent days following a deadly ambush by the gangs, during which a Kenyan police officer was reported missing, the mission's first casualty. There is a lack of adequate equipment used by multinational security mission MSS personnel, including their vehicles. By 2026, MSS multinational security mission is to stabilize the security situation in Haiti to facilitate elections in Haiti in 2026. Heavily armed gangs stormed a city northeast of the capital, Port-au-Prince, in a brazen attack that freed at least 500 inmates from the local prison. Some estimates now suggest that as much as 80% of Port-au-Prince and its surrounding areas are ruled by militias. The cost to civilians has been catastrophic by the end of 2024. UN data showed that violence caused the death of over 5,600 people and displaced more than 10 lakhs across Haiti. Since January 2025, another 6,000 people have been forced from their homes in the capital alone, as brutal violence ranging from kidnappings to systematic sexual assaults continues. Once again, Haiti is spiraling into a humanitarian disaster marked by food shortages, overwhelmed health services and the mass displacement. In response to the relentless violence and government inaction, thousands of Haitians have taken to the streets. The people of Haiti have taken to the streets. Haiti's problems are not new, and neither is foreign involvement. France imposed a crushing indemnity after Haiti's independence in 1804. The US occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934. The US and allies supported the dictatorships in the Cold War era. A deeply controversial UN peacekeeping mission in Haiti began in 2004. The 2021 assassination of President Jovenel Moise deepened the collapse of state institutions, leaving a power vacuum that armed gangs have readily filled. What Haiti needs is not another externally imposed solution, but a bold commitment to Haitian sovereignty. The democratic institutions are to be rebuilt. The people of Haiti shall reclaim control of their future. Sixth item, comrades. Thousands protest in Italy against armament agenda. Almost 1 lakh people took to the streets of Rome on 5th April, demanding an end to Europe's rearmament agenda. During the central rally, demonstrators condemned Rearming Europe initiative recently launched by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, as well as the military spending plans announced by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government. The Five-Star Movement of Italy has recently aligned with the left bloc in the European Parliament, criticized the government's military priorities. The funds earmarked for planned defense expenses could instead be used to alleviate ongoing crises in healthcare and education. Rank and file cadre, organized under the Union USB, held a dedicated rally highlighting the erosion of labor rights and demanding an immediate reversal of the government's armament agenda. The Union warned that wages in Italy have dropped nearly 9% over the past 15 years. Rearmament serves no one except to guarantee corporate profits. Seventh item, comrades, a strike took place in Greece. Strike in Greece. Tens of thousands of people in Greece responded to a general strike call, escalating demands for justice for the 57 people killed in the Tempe train crash 2 years ago and protesting the austerity policies that contributed to the tragedy. The new general strike followed weeks of protests and widespread industrial action. Since the end of February, marking the anniversary of the crash, trade unions, students, and the broader public have been mobilizing to demand accountability from state officials and corporate representatives. Protesters insist that the Tempe tragedy was a direct result of railway privatization and the subsequent underinvestment in infrastructure. The All Workers Militant Front, the Union PAME, emphasized the importance of the 9th April strike in this process. Protesters have also called for the revitalization of essential services such as education and healthcare. Overall life security in Greece has declined to unprecedented levels. In the next 12 years, Prime Minister announced 2,500 crore euros spending plans for so-called defense. US NATO trains pass through populated areas of Greece, carrying ammunition constantly through towns and villages without any protection or safety measures. These shipments include tons of ammunition and TNTs for Ukraine and bullets for Israel, endangering thousands of lives in Greece. At the port of Piraeus, dock workers blocked a shipment of bullets in late 2024. The next step in this growing resistance will be a mass mobilization on 1st May Day, where workers and the broader public will once again raise their voices for a more humane society. 8th item, comrades, general strike in Palestine. As part of a global strike demanding the end of Israel's genocidal aggression on the Gaza Strip, a general strike has been declared across Palestine on 7th April. The strike saw a total shutdown and cessation of all economic, educational, and operational activities throughout the day. Simultaneously, thousands of Palestinians took to the streets in the West Bank central city of Ramallah, demanding an immediate ceasefire. 9th item, comrades, Israel burns Palestinian journalist alive. In yet another brutal crime, Israeli warplanes targeted a media tent near Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip on 6th April. 2 journalists were killed and 9 others injured in the assault. The airstrike was widely condemned by international organizations and human rights groups, which considered it as a deliberate attack. The death toll of Palestinian journalists and media workers killed by Israel since the genocide began in Gaza in October 2023 had reached 234, an astronomical figure. 10th item, comrades, Israel's attacks on Syria. At least 9 people were killed and several others injured in a major Israeli assault on a forest between 2 cities in Syria's southern part. The aggression, which included a land incursion and airstrikes, was carried out by the Israeli occupation forces in the early hours of 3rd April. Strategic sites were among the recorded targets, including the Scientific Research Center in Damascus. Israel has already violated ceasefire with Hezbollah of Lebanon. Israel, instead of resuming talks on the second phase of Hamas-Israel ceasefire deal, it has resumed its brutal genocide on Gaza. 11th item, comrades, we are having presidential elections in Ecuador today. On 13th April, South American country Ecuador is going to the second round of presidential polls to choose between far-right incumbent Daniel Noboa and candidate of the Citizen Revolution, a left candidate, Luisa Gonzalez. In the second round of polls, Luisa Gonzalez, the left party candidate, may win with the support of another left party which came third in the first round of polls. Lastly, comrades, Sri Lanka-India defense cooperation. In 1964, during the second summit of the non-aligned movement in Cairo, Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Sirimava Bandaranaike, proposed that the Indian Ocean be turned into a zone of peace that was free of military bases and nuclear weapons. Jawaharlal Nehru, the then Prime Minister of India, supported the proposal. 61 years later, Sri Lanka and India have now entered into a memorandum of understanding on defense cooperation. Thank you, comrades. Wassalam. See you next week.